We are recording. Reverend Bass, how do you want me to call you, Reverend Bass? Or I mean,
Yeah, that's fine. Reverend Bass, Reverend Willard Bass, Pastor Willard. I have those names. So, but Reverend Bass is fine.
well, thank you very much for doing this interview. It means a lot. Basically, the way I'd like to start the interview would be for you to talk a little bit about where you grew up
Okay.
and college, high school, and then ultimately talk about how you became a reverend.
Sure.
Okay.
I am originally from Fayetteville, North Carolina. My father was military, so I grew up traveling. The first years of my life were in a predominantly integrated community or society. We traveled on two different occasions. I started school in Germany, third grade, through about middle school, came back, and then went back again and finished up middle school. And so my whole life has been looking through the lens of a broader perspective of life. I say that it's because of my traveling that I was able to have a broader worldview and understand that the world was bigger than what I experienced initially growing up in a segregated society, in Fayetteville. I grew up in segregated schools, elementary school, and Newbo Elementary, and junior high school, Washington Drive, and then E. Smith High School. And from there, then I went to Fayetteville State University, got my degree in chemistry. It was very impactful for me. I actually started out in biology, had intended to be a doctor, but after I spent a number of years getting through college and saw what it was going to take to become a doctor, I decided that I would go into research instead. Was influenced though by one of my professors, a Chinese professor named Dr. Chow. He was one of the classes that I took. Probably just about every semester I had a science, and he came up to me at the end of my freshman year and said he's been watching me, and that he says that you seem to be having problems in biology. He said, but you do very well in chemistry. He said, if you come to chemistry, I will watch out for you. He said, let's consider. So I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I took him up on it. So I changed my major to chemistry in my sophomore year because of him. Very influential person, and of course I did, fairly well in the chemistries and stuff like that. So all of these experiences have helped me to really understand my journey of life, if you will, from Fayetteville State. I learned about how to do an interview. I actually in my the year of my senior year, the emplacement director, he had been getting companies to come and interview students, and he did it during the summer of between my junior and senior year. And he called me and said he's got a company coming, to do some interviews. He wanted to know if I'd be willing, to come. He said that the school is out now, most of the students are gone, and he got these recruiters here, and he needed someone. And I said, okay, well, what company are they from? And he said, J.C. Penney's. I said, well, J.C. Penney's. I said, well, I'm a science major. I don't really see how I can, benefit from that company. He said, well, why don't you just come for the experience, And so I did. I took him up on it. I said, okay, I'll go to the interview. And so I went to the interview, and it was two gentlemen that came from the headquarters. They were from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so they asked me, the typical kind of questions, what are you doing? What do you aspire to do? And basically, then I basically told them that I wanted to be in management. I saw myself, being, in leadership roles, and that I thought that I could probably, do the work. And so I noticed that one of them then, he started looking through my resume, and I knew that my freshman year I didn't do well. Just like any, basic college student coming in and trying to get adjusted, I didn't do a whole lot. And so I jumped in and said, I know that my resume, especially in my early years, is not what it should have been. But I got better as I went along, and I said, I'll assure you, if you give me an interview, a chance to continue this interview, then I will make it worth your while. And they were impressed with that, that I would offer that to them, and so they did. So I got an interview to go to the headquarters in Milwaukee, and they flew me up, and I had a chance. It was an all-day kind of interview, and by then I was really beginning to look at how the society and was shaped. What was the demographics? Very intentional about watching of how companies were hiring, how attentive they were to diversity in the workforce. And so we went through the interview that day, and matter of fact, a guy that picked me up, he was an African American. He was a supervisor over the maintenance area. We talked a little bit, and then I went through the interview. And at the end of the day, the manager asked me, said, "Well, what do you think about the job?" I said, "Well, yes, interesting." I said, "Question I have though," I said, "Well, how much diversity do you have, in your management, workforce?" And he said, "Well, you met, our maintenance supervisor." I said, "Yeah, but is there any more besides him?" They said, "No, he's the only one." I said, "Well, okay, that's interesting." So, and of course, they said, "Well, that's why we're recruiting. We want to improve our diversity." I said, "Okay, that's fine." So the interview ended, and I went home. And about 2 weeks later, I got a call from them, and they said that I had really, done well on the interview, but they were going to. They thought they would, seek elsewhere. That they didn't want to make me an offer. And so I said, "Okay, well, thank you, I appreciate that." And so I had to, I had to reflect on that, right? And so I said, "Okay, I believe I know why, that I probably didn't get the opportunity. And that is that I might have been a little too assertive, in wanting to, back in the that was 1977, 78 time frame, of really being concerned about how diverse workplaces were. So I had to get more strategic, from then on as I went forward in looking and evaluating. But at the same time, I took a job in Raleigh as a chemist. That by that time I had worked with Howard Lee campaign. He ran for lieutenant governor in North Carolina, and with Jim Hunt on the ticket. And of course, Jim Hunt won, the election, but he didn't get elected as lieutenant governor. And so Governor Hunt appointed him to the Department of Natural Resources. And so he then hired me as a chemist. I had worked for him on his campaign, and I was a chemistry major. And so he hired me. So my first year was working as a chemist in Raleigh in the Department of Natural Resources. And the type of work it was today we have the issues around pollution, especially things like the Duke Power, where they've done, all the things around the soot, and all of that, aggregates runoff on these ponds. Well, if I had been working for them today, I would have been the one probably evaluating, that whole situation. So it was a very interesting kind of work. We had samples that came across it. We had testers that would go get some water samples from across the state, and they bring them into the lab in Raleigh, and then we would evaluate them. And if folks were out of compliance, where there was an industrial doing, effluents, and they put some pollutant in the water, they get a notice and they get fined or whatever. So I learned a lot, through that process, if you will. But while I was there, I wanted to try to get, promoted. My thing was that, my daddy told me that, get the best education you can so you can get the best job. So I'm always trying to figure out, what it takes to get more education and get this better job. And so promotion started coming in the department. And then it was like, levels up. I was a chemist 1, 2, 3, and you can go up to supervision. And so I wanted to start applying for these jobs. Well, what I found out, though, was that it didn't matter how good I was at the work. It was based on seniority. The state had a seniority program, so it's based on tenure. The more you're with it, the longer you're with the state, the more chance you have of getting this position. And so what was happening was that there was teachers from across the state, different places in different areas, and they were applying for these jobs, and they were getting these positions, over me. And I figured, it'd probably take me 5, years or more, to get enough seniority then to get a promotion. So I said, I think I'm going to go, do something else. And so I decided to look out, at industry at the time. And I had also done some work while I was in college as an intern. And so I was hired by American Can Company, and that provided me a summer where I could go work in the industry as a chemist. American Can was a blue chip company back then, a major conglomerate. and they had 5 divisions. They had a packaging division, they had a shipping division, they had a retail, and the packaging division, because I was a chemist, was the area that I wanted to work in. And so they hired me as an intern for a summer, and I had the opportunity to go up there in Wisconsin and work and learn about the areas of manufacturing and science. And I worked in a laboratory part of the summer. And one of the projects that I had was a glue project, was developing the formulation for a glue, for what do you call it, a resealable glue, soft glue. And I worked on it the whole summer, and then I had a chance to go in the manufacturing area and work around the machinery. It's very hot. These machines were running, very fast and hot. And so at the end of the internship, they asked me, what do you think, which area you want to work in? And I told them I really would like to work, in the research area. And they said, well, we don't have any opportunities in the research area, but we do have opportunities in the manufacturing area, if you'd want to do that. And because I had already worked in the manufacturing area and it was hot, I said, no, well, I don't think I want to work, in the manufacturing area. I still want committed to work, in research. So I went home, and while I was home, I went to the grocery store and was shopping one day, and I went to the cheese, because we eat cheese, and had a single wrap cheese, and the cheese had the cellophane resealable pack that I had done the research on. And so I was really blown away, that wow, that I had worked on this product, and did this formulation for this resealable glue, and here it is now, in the store. And so that was a moment that I was really seeing, how the world works, and how you can make contributions. Of course, I didn't get no credit for that, but other than as an intern. But so it was still a part of my story. So I then left the state and called the headquarters for American Can and asked them about opportunities, because I had done an internship there. They remembered me, and the human resource guy said, well, why don't you give me some time, let me check around and see what opportunities we have. And by the time I told him it didn't really make any difference what the area was, I just wanted to, to do a different type of work, to advance. So he called me back in about 2 weeks and said, well, what do you think about Cleveland, Ohio? And I said, well, I've never been to Cleveland, but if that's what the job is, he said, yeah, there's a process engineering job there. And it was there's a Dobeckman plant in Cleveland, Ohio. And he said, what do you think about that? I said, well, if that's what the job is, I'll take it, So, so I went up there, and I think it was like 78, and started as a process engineer, and had a culture shock right away, because I was going up there in the fall and the winter, and they had the first snow, And by that time I was married, and so my wife, we were waiting, we were used to having the news to come on. They announced these schedules, Schedule A, Schedule B, and because of the snow, and we waited, and then they never did announce. I said, well, honey, I guess we got to go to work. They never said anything about the weather or anything, no changes, in schedule. And so we did. We, made our way to work, and it was a pretty nice snow too. And so we got to work, and when I got in the plant, and he said, hey, well, how you doing? I said, man, what's wrong with y'all? He said, what are you talking about? He says, I said, all the snow out here, and they didn't have no, changes in the schedule or anything. He said, man, no. He said, did you see some big trucks out there with big old blades on them that were high? He said, yeah. He says, well, that's what takes care of us. He says, no, we don't have no shutdown. He said, we 24/7. I said, wow, okay. So I had a learning experience about the weather, So I got up there and worked for about 2.5 years as an engineer, and had some situations come up, around, again, socialization, this idea, how we are in a majority place of a corporation. I'll share one story because it was really a learning process for me, and it was really something that stuck in my mind. I did a lot of tennis up there. By then, I was very athletic, and at least in tennis, I played tennis in college. And so as far as recreation, my pastime was tennis. But during the summer, there was a golf tournament. They had a plant golf tournament, and they came to me one day and asked me if I would play on, this team as a substitute for this guy. And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. I had taken golf in high school, and in college, so I knew how to golf, even though it wasn't my first sport. So I did. I substituted that particular week, and then they come back the next week and said, could you substitute again? I said, yeah, fine. So about 2 or 3 weeks in, they said, well, the guy is sick. He's probably not going to come back. What do you think about, finishing the year out with him? I said, yeah, I'll be glad to do that. So I finished the year out, and the company was large enough that it had a formal banquet. You know, they provided resources for, you know, to have this banquet for this golf tournament, and so we went to this banquet, and you know, they were giving these trophies out, and I got 4 trophies. You know, I got you know, low individual, low net, and then I got some team trophies. Well, at one point, at one of the times when they voted me up for the team, picked the trophy up, they called my name, and I went up to get this trophy. And the trophy, you know, is the gold emblems, you know, the golfing trophy they have, with the guy, he's got his hands up in the air, right? And they have painted the guy's hands and his face black. And my automatic response was, wow, you thought enough of me to customize my trophy. I mean, it was like that, you know what I mean? I didn't like, you know, and everybody got quiet, you know, when they presented me the trophy, expecting, you know, me to respond in such a way, you know. But I didn't. So after the banquet was over, the guy came up to me, the organizer, said, hey man, you know, well, we didn't mean, you know, we just kind of, I said, well, no man, it's no problem, you know, cool. He said, well, we brought this other emblem for you if you want it, you know. And I said, well, no. And then I said, yeah, let me have it, you know, as a reminder, I'll keep it. And so, you know, and then in the back of my mind, this whole idea of then, how do I, as an African American, then navigate the society? You know, how do I then, if I want to survive, if I want to make it in this world, you know, what things can I do? And that was a story for me. You know, it's just telling this idea that if situations are going to come up, you know, how will you respond? What's going to be your takeaway in order to continue to succeed in the society? So I put that one in the back of my mind. So I left Cleveland and then moved to Winston-Salem. Was up there about 2.5 years, and found that it was time for us to come back south. And so we did. And I started looking around, had some recruiters to see where there was positions available, and I heard that there was a company that does a similar work in Winston-Salem called R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. And so I had my headhunter, I called him and said, look man, I want to get back south. Why don't you, you know, check with R.J. Reynolds and see, you know, if they have a place, you know, that I can, a position. And of course, affirmative action was going on by the end, you know, a regular administration was in, and so they called back, and the guy called and said, yeah, he said they're hiring. I said, okay, cool, set me up for an interview. So I went down, and I chose to do it around the holiday so I could bring, you know, my family down, and did this again, one of these all-day interviews, you know, with R.J. Reynolds, and it was here, you know, in the city of Winston-Salem, and it was interesting though, the idea of culture kinds of things and changes, you know. Went to this interview, and I met the plant manager, and the day we walked in, and he said, hey, hello, come on, and he have a seat, you know, and he's talking, and we talked a little bit, and then he said, excuse me, and then he would bend down, and, you know, he's spinning his desk, you know, and I'm saying, well, what in the world is going on? And we talked to Bordeaux, and then he spin again, and I'm saying, what is he doing, you know? And we went to the interview, and then we went out in the plant, and then we started walking around these machines, and then I saw people spitting in these things, you know. And I said, oh, okay, so they're chewing tobacco, you know. So I said, this is interesting, you know, culture thing again, you know. This is a tobacco manufacturing, you know, company. We did the packaging for the tobacco, you know, division, and so tobacco chewing was a big thing, you know. So I said, okay, this is another thing, you know. I got a, you know, culture shift, you know. So that same day, we went to lunch. So I had to meet the other managers and vice president. So we went to lunch. We went over here at Ryan Steakhouse, and we were waiting for one of the VPs from R&D to come. And he finally got there, and he came in, you know, and they were introducing, you know, him and introducing me. And so we were eating, and one of the other vice presidents said, Jim, he says, I don't know whether you know it or not, but you and Willard got the same suit on. And he said, yeah, and he's wearing it a hell of a lot better than I'm wearing mine. And so, you know, it was interesting, though, how even with, you know, our society being the way it is, I felt like it was necessary for me to go out and get a nice suit. So I went to a make company and bought this suit, and was, you know, and it happened to be the same suit that this vice president had on. And it ended up being the thing, though, that brought us closer together, because he ended up became my mentor then while I was at R.J. Reynolds. And so we became good friends, and I did a lot of good, you know, work under him and in the department. So I was an engineer when I initially there. Then I went into manufacturing. I was hired as a plant man, as a department head, and I began then to work among the manufacturing folks running product. At the time, I was actually hired there as an engineer to start up a new piece of equipment. It was 160 foot long, and it was a process called inline laminating, where they would put a laminating process and a printing process together. Instead of doing printing separately and the laminating separately, they decided they want to combine these two technologies. And the experience that I had would allow them to be able to do that. So I was successful, after I started the piece of equipment up and got it running. And they wanted to know if I would be interested in getting into manufacturing. I said, yeah, I would.
Okay, let me hold you just a sec, because I think we have, well, let's see now, we have 2 hours of recording time.
Okay.
So I think this is all wonderful stuff. That story of the golf thing is makes you think.
Right.
Well, so then ultimately move us towards the becoming a minister.
Okay. So in the same time I was at Reynolds, I after I got promoted to the plant manager, the department head, my department was running successfully. I was actually hired to change the department from working with supervision to working without supervision. They call it total quality first, this idea of working without supervision. They call it self-directed work teams. Duran had gone to Japan, and he studied the Japan technology and all, and then I was trained in that process. And so they wanted to know if I would be willing to do that work with the department, and I was. So after about 2 years of doing that, then the department was actually running without supervision. They called me in one day and then said that my job was being eliminated, that I was losing my job. And I said, what's that about? And they said, well, we made decisions, and we just felt like it was time, for us to part ways. And I said, wow, this is interesting, So I had to think about that, whether I would pursue that, and because it wasn't, nothing I had done. I mean, my performance was very well. I did have some, some instances, but it wasn't the kind of instances that I thought that would impact my ability to do work. So I decided then to take a package, and then I had to evaluate what I was going to do. Would I want to look for another job in a corporation, or do I want to pursue something else? I decided to pursue something else. I wanted to then be my own boss. Wanted to be able to, make a difference. At the time, I had been looking at, housing. There was a need for affordable housing, our community especially. And so I began to look at that and decided that I wanted to be a builder. And so I took the resources that they gave me. They gave me an office downtown as I left the company, and some resources for a year. And so during that year, then I looked around at what it would take, to become a builder. I went to banks, I went to other builders. I even met the builders who built the Wachovia building downtown, then the new one now that's a Wells Fargo bank, and it was a relationship between a black and a white contractor. I actually went to Atlanta and met with the black contractor, to find out, how he did business. His advice to me was, don't get into business because you didn't have any experience. And at the end of our interview or talk, he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I'm still going to do it. I appreciate your help. I'll take that into consideration. So I came back and decided that I was going to become a builder, and I went into construction. I had another guy who was a builder at the time who helped me to get started. So we did building for 4 years. I formed a company with a realtor who did selling. So I built the houses, he sold the houses. And then in '99, very successful company at the time, we ran into some problems. We decided that we were going to part ways. And so I was really wrestling with, what I was going to do next with my life, this idea, okay, what comes next? And I remember I was home, and it was early in the morning, whatever. I went in the bathroom, and I'm, trying to study this thing, and I heard this voice say to me, just like you and I are talking, I've done all this for you, what are you going to do for me? And that was a moment that I had, to pause, and I basically said, okay, Lord, I surrender, and decided that I was going to ministry, just like that. And so the next morning, when my wife got up, I told her that I'm going into ministry, and of course she thought I was crazy because we had just, going through, leaving the company, starting my own business. I had poured all my resources into this business, hadn't gotten them all out, but yet now here I'm going into ministry. And so she said, well, how you make a living? I said, well, I don't know yet, but I'm going to go talk to our pastor. And so when I went to our pastor, Reverend Mendez was my pastor at the time, I told him, he said, well, I'm not surprised. He said, but you got to get prepared. I said, what do you mean get prepared? He said, well, you got to go to school. I said, well, I've been out of school 25 years. I look like going back to college. He said, well, if you want to, well, he put it this way. He said, if you're going to swim with the sharks, you need to be prepared. Never heard that way, but if you're going to swim with the sharks, you need to be prepared. So I said, okay, fine. So he said, well, I'll tell you what, you won't have a problem with any school you go to. You're very grounded. You know who you are, And so I chose 5 schools, and Wake Forest was the one that gave me money at the time. I needed money to go to school. They gave me money, paid my way through school. I still had to make a living, but I did. So it was while I was there that I really began to solidify, if you will, this idea of what I believed that God had called me to do. This idea of being in ministry, but building community. What does it mean to be authentically in community? And so I had that thought in my mind. And so while I was at Wake Forest, and I really was caught off guard, I guess you could say, because I thought by going to this seminary that we're all there for basically the same reason. That's to learn about God, to learn about church and how to do community. But I ran into racism right there in the divinity school. And it wasn't blatant, but it was there. I mean, the idea of not having a voice and not having, the kinds of things that would be helpful to me in ministry, courses that, we would think would be helpful to us, representation on the student body, legislature, that sort of thing. We didn't have any of that. And so we then had to organize, to get those sort of things. And we started an organization called Acony, which was an organization that was designed to help Black seminarians to have a place, in a space where it's predominantly white, to have community, and to have connections. So that worked out well for us at the time. There was 5 of us at the time when we were there, out of a class of about 45. So I started raising the question about race and racism, and it fell on deaf ears mostly, but then in some cases, folks responded. I had a professor that actually became, one of my mentors. And I told him that I wanted to address racism. And so my thesis was, by the time I graduated, was you can't have the beloved community without dealing with racism. Basically, that's what I said in my thesis. And so I then had to decide then what does that look like? What does that mean? And by that time, I had been through different kinds of diversity trainings, equity trainings, and the thing that I thought was different about most of them was the fact that the company would bring in a trainer, they do the training, then they go away. And the institution would provide some resources for this work for a while, but then it would just, wane to go away. And I felt like if we're going to deal with something like racism and oppression, injustices, that we need to have an institution that would be in the community. So I began to think about the idea of having an institution that could be here, trained, but also, be like a partner. And so I began to share that story. I went to one of the local foundations here, East Primrose, and I pitched the idea to them as I was getting ready to graduate, and they said they thought that was a good idea, that that's something that they would entertain a proposal. And so then, as I began to prepare for graduation, I got a call from a local pastor here, Kelly Carpenter at Green Street. And he asked me what I was doing. I said, well, I thought I was going to be working for a nonprofit because of my experience in building, that sort of thing, and the church, but they did not come to fruition. So he said, well, why don't you, consider coming and join me? He said, I've got a position for a outreach, pastor, and we're diverse and we want to stay that way. And so I told him that I didn't really think about being a pastor as such, but I saw myself being in ministry. He said, well, why don't you come, and worship with us? So I did that. And then after I got there, I really saw that this place where these people were actually trying to be together, really, struggling with this idea of what it meant to be children of God, my words. And so I joined them, and then I told Kelly about this idea that I had about starting this institution and beginning to address racism more directly. Have a place where people could come together, and work on the training, but actually do some activity, actually do something. And he liked the idea, and he said, well, I've done some training myself in Greensboro before I came to Winston. on the organization called Crossroads. They have an anti-racism training. He said, why don't you check with them? So I checked with them, and we got them to come to Winston. And so then we wrote a proposal to Z. Smith Reynolds. And they turned it down the first time. They said because the racism is bigger than just your church. It needs to be for the community. So we went back then to the drawing board. By that time, an organization called Change had formed, come into existence as IEF, organizing model. Saul Selinsky, developed it in Chicago, right? And so we then had birthed our organization called Change. So I went to the director there and asked him about, who could I get to support this work? And he gave me several organizations, nonprofits, churches, and I organized with him and told him I wanted to form an organization, an institution that would provide training but also provide action. And most of them joined. So in 2004, then we established the Institute for Dismantling Racism, and then began to do trainings with support. We went to the city. By then we had been with the city. The city gave us a resolution. The resolution basically said that we, that we then.
Can you hold it a little bit more? Okay.
That they supported our work.
Wonderful.
And then that they would then be the backers. And so they did support the establishment of IDR. We did trainings with a team model. And then from the team model, we had 6 teams that were actually established. The health department, the police department were 2 of them, several churches, the Presbyterian Israel Racial Dialogue, which is a Presbyterian denomination, and then the Moravian Church, Green Street, and IDR were the teams we had. So we did trainings, and we did what we call peer learnings for about 7 years after we trained. 2014, I began to see that people stopped doing the training, stopped doing the work. And so we decided at a point that we need to do something then. I still felt like that the work is important. Institutional racism was still existing. And so we decided then that we would address an issue in our community. And so we went to the city, and the city said that Winston-Salem then was the 5th largest food desert in the nation, Forsyth County. And so we decided we wanted to address food. And so we began to develop a structure around that and began to pitch that vision in the community around the idea of addressing food insecurity. Any place where within 2 miles a community or individual doesn't have access to healthy food, nutritional food, cost effective, right, and easy to get to. And so we decided that we wanted to address this idea of food. The question was then, though, how would we do that? We didn't want to be a traditional model. Because of the anti-racist work that I had done, I still wanted to embrace the work in some way. And so we said that, well, why don't we do a co-op model? A co-op model is a way that we bring people together, right? And we agree that there's an issue and we want to work on the issue together. And so we did that. And so IDR, the combination that we had with IDEA was the fact that we would provide the mechanism for folks to come in, join, embrace our values, that we're all, human, that we're all and deserve, the resources, that we all have rights, if you will. And so along with that, there's been other issues that have been major for me as I left the Ministers' Conference, as the president of the Ministers' Conference, had gone to Raleigh and gotten involved in the Forward Together movement and brought that information back here. We did several organizations around that work. But still, we needed ways that we could, get in the community and do more, bring, more hope, if you will, to the community. And a group of us were working in the community and had gotten some requests from organizations that were predominantly white. And one of them was a yoga studio. And the owner of the yoga studio wanted to do what they call social justice activism. They felt like their organization was too white, but they were beginning to see the issues, especially when 45 became president. They wanted to be more active. They wanted to be more engaged. And they wanted to know then if I would be interested in helping them or partnering with them. And at first I couldn't see this idea of yoga and social justice work, right? So we had a meeting, we talked and we met. And I began to see the importance of this idea of yoga, because in yoga they have a very internal piece where you work with your emotions. This idea of identifying the emotions that you carry with you. Another way to look at it is this idea of microaggressions, right? We all have those microaggressions. And the yoga then would help you then to identify the microaggressions and then be able to get them out, and then understand what they were. So after I went to one of her sessions, I said, yeah, this is something we need to do. We need to work together and see if we can combine these two entities so that folks can work on themselves internally, right, and become healthy, but at the same time use it as a mechanism to do something externally. And so each time that we got involved with folks, we would invite them to get involved and share as a way of doing the work. The thing that has been, I guess, most enlightening for me was the fact that our nation continues to hold on to this capitalist model as a way of living, while there are individuals who are concerned about that and who want to work with that. But it's difficult to figure out how to do that work. And so we found mechanisms and ways that we can help them do the work through this Justice Collective, and now through what we call the Truth and Reconciliation work that we're doing. That's similar to what Nelson Johnson did in Greensboro, but it's different in that what we said that we wanted to do was to identify areas where there has been a history of injustice, things like revitalization, where municipalities have gone in communities and co-opted the communities in order to provide better access or better community appearance. But then communities of color, if you're ones that were suffered from that, right? They're the ones that were forced to move out, right? They were the ones that had to learn how to live another way. And so we decided that we would take a look at that from the perspective of history, because this trauma that we say that we carry is still a historical trauma. We have generations of folks who are still dealing with this idea of brokenness and trauma and pain. And we felt like if we begin to deal with that first, to provide some healing, provide some truth, provide some storytelling, and then find ways that we can address those issues, then we believe we can move our community forward. We connected with the University of Virginia. They have what they call reparative justice. And that's where institutions and municipalities connect with the community and do work on, on brokenness, on injustices that were done, policies that were passed. And so we started to do that process here in Winston-Salem. And we've had our first meeting with the city and county. And the idea is to work with the city county planning boards, find out what they've done historically, things that have caused pain and hurt, provide a mechanism for people to tell stories, and then use that as a way to then be different, use it as a way to then change the way we do our policies and procedures and practices in our community, and provide more voice on these training, on these departments, so people can be a part of the work.
This is all incredible. In terms of the food desert, I mean, we're sitting here in the offices of the Share. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the grocery store you have and all that?
Sure. So 5 years ago, again, really wanting to move the transformation work is what we have come to understand it. The idea of inviting individuals and institutions into a process where we acknowledge the fact that racism is systemic, it's institutional, right? And that we have been socialized and conditioned, right, to see life certain ways based on our culture and upbringing. For instance, we all are born into a family. From the family, then we're educated in an education institution. From the education institution, we then go into the community, and we either go into a trade or we go into a career, right? And then we're still impacted by other institutions like media, the police department, the healthcare system. All of these different institutions impact our lives, and they all are participants, if you will, in the idea of systemic racism. And so we began to help people to understand that. And so while we were doing that process, we said that let's then be the example. How do we then get people to embrace this idea of transformation and get them a place where they could use the work? And so then that's where the idea of addressing food deserts. When we found out that Winston-Salem has, these 11 food deserts, and eventually it doubled. I mean, we started this process out 5 years ago, and then we partnered with Wake Forest University. And one of their classes helped us with our social media, but then they had to then do a research project on identifying what food deserts were. Well, while they did the study on food deserts, they then identified that the number had doubled from 11 up to about 220. And so that meant that, again, instead of getting better, the problem got worse. So we then said that let's address food deserts. And so we found this location here in West Salem Shopping Center. It was already projected by the city on its 10, 15-year plan to be to have growth. They have built a ball field up there, and they also have begun to do some development down and increase the size of the streets. And so we decided we wanted to be in a place where there's a food desert, but at the same time it had the ability to be economically viable. And so we've been putting the pieces together, if you will, for this food store. It's been one that we intentionally wanted to be healthy, and also intentionally to be connected to local farmers. So all the produce we are projecting to come from local farmers. It would be nutritional. One part of our work with that is this idea of a food pharmacy. We found out that there's a way that we could become healthier by partnering with doctors, and instead of providing medicines, if you will, for things like diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol, for those level kinds of illnesses, they could prescribe food. And so we then partnered with the medical community, and had been piloting a program now for about a year and a half called Food Pharmacy. A doctor would examine the patient, and then when the patient would be qualified to be prescribed food instead of medicine, they would write out a food script, and they bring the food script to us, and then we would provide them a box of food that would be nutritionally healthy. And then what we also said we can do is that if they don't know how to prepare the food, then we can prepare the food for them. We can have nutritional classes, that sort of thing. And so that's a mechanism we think is very important. The idea of uniting the community. Our space here is a community space. We have meetings here community-wide, but we also have member meetings. We now have over 500 members in our food co-op. We are projected to have 1,000 by the time we open up in the next 6 months. And the goal is to provide healthy food, and also to unite the community.
Wow, that's quite an undertaking. So are there a lot of volunteers associated with this effort?
Yes, there are. We have over 500 members. We're connected with different organizations. The city has done a lot of help for us, the county, as far as resources, the Ministers' Conference, and various nonprofit groups and churches. We have a steering committee, and we have a board. And between those two organizations, we're able to manage the work. We now have 4 employees. We're projecting to have 25 employees once the store opens up. Our goal is to provide livable wages within the first 2 years, so the person doesn't have to run around and have several different jobs. And so so we've been doing the hard work of putting the structure together and then modeling what it means to be in community. And we think we've done a very good job of that.
So you actually have a store that people can go to?
Yes, right now we're located here at West Salem. We have a mini market that actually, you can buy food online, or you can buy food in the store and go in the shop. Most of the products we have there are either organic or sustainable. We had targeted this particular location here to be what we call a foodie location, which means that it has a lot of very healthy food offerings. And then we're intending to take this model forward. If this model works here, then we're gonna replicate it in different places. So we expect to have 2 locations here in Winston-Salem, and then we're going to move it around the state. We're going to go to Fayetteville and then Baltimore, because that's places where we have connections, and then we hope to be able to make this a national model.
Okay, let's do a segue back to the Moral Monday movement, which is how we met originally. Remember back to 2013, and back then, is there somebody talking out there? I think I can hear her.
Yeah.
Is there any way she could not? Because it'll pick it up.
Will it? Okay.
Remember, you're wired up.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Hannah, we think we can pick up sounds that you all are making, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing how
that would be something they could pick that up. That is.
Well, see, with these headphones, I can hear everything.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that.
So in 2013 or so, I actually was contacted by Erling Palmer at the time.
Go ahead.
And I was president of the Ministers' Conference here, and she contacted me and said that There is a lot of shenanigans going on in Raleigh, that the whole legislative process was one that was undemocratic, and that she felt like we as ministers need to come down and see what's going on and then provide some type of support and voice to the wrongs that we're doing. The legislature at that time was, having sessions and passing bills without, due process, without the whole legislative body getting involved. And so that's really how I got involved. And I went down to Raleigh. I planned a meeting. I went down to Raleigh as a representative of the Ministers' Conference. We were down there a day. They had some meetings. They informed us, of what was going on with the legislator, and they then invited us to get involved. Reverend Barber had already been down there by that time, and he had had his first protests. They actually, got arrested. Some ministers, I knew some of them. Matter of fact, my pastor at the time, Reverend Mendez, was one of the ones. And so I then brought the information back to Winston-Salem and said, this is what's going on in Raleigh. We need to get involved. We need to do some things, and invited other ministers, to go down with me. And it was actually 6 ministers from Winston-Salem. We all went down together and didn't plan to get arrested, but that particular day when we went down there, then we went through the process and felt like it was our duty, to voice our concern, of the injustices that were going on. So we got arrested, and then that started the process. So every Monday, they had a Moral Monday event, and I then went down every Monday. And for 2 years, I was involved in the Moral Monday movement. At some point, we brought it here. We brought Reverend Barber here to Winston-Salem. We actually had a very large gathering several times, again, to inform folks about what was going on. Those types of things are very empowering. The idea of seeing people coming together, citizens, right, of common mindsets and passions around justice. And so it really fed me a lot by just going down to Raleigh and being around brothers and sisters of all races, ethnicities, persuasions, standing together, if you will, and wanting to do this justice work. So I learned a lot from that, and of course, it continues to be a part of me and a part of the work that we do.
Yeah, it's interesting to think back to how big a movement it became. And people knew about it, heard about it across the country, and yourself, along with Reverend Barber and Reverend
Mendez. He had Reverend Leach from here, Dennis Leach, and Reverend Sharp, Steve Boyd, Dr. Carlton Eversley. Were all the ones in the group the Monday we went down and got arrested. So yeah, it's something to see democracy at work. If you begin to remember, our nation, from the Tea Party on, right? There's always been protests, right? There's always been a need for voices, to rise. Sometimes it's been individual voices. Sometimes it's been groups of people. I think the Moral Monday movement was a good example of groups of people getting together. And like you said, it started out as a small group, 50 or so. But then, each Monday, it looks like it grew, and it was basically word of mouth when people heard about it. And then once you went down there, it's something you couldn't, it's like you couldn't resist it. You had to stay with it. I think that's the beauty of Moral Mondays and the Forward Together movement, and it's transcended now to a national movement. Reverend Barber now has developed the Poor People's Campaign, now bringing in the idea of poor people and the issues of injustice around resources that our Congress and government continues to not allow, for everyone to have access to it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back at Reverend, Dr. King, and how he had the Poor People's Campaign and went to Chicago and thought they were worse there almost than he said in Mississippi, the white people, and how much hatred there was there. And I think, interesting, the intersection of poverty and race is something that, I think we just have to keep addressing because they're so tied together.
Right. Again, because of the way our nation was established, this idea that a group of people came to America for the sole reason of resources, right? Land and resources, and then continue to make money or wealth on the backs of an enslaved people, right? The whole nation was then established by this idea of wealth, free labor. And yet even our stories have been told initially from a perspective of like a fairy tale or something, right? But we have now, Hannah Nicole Jones has actually began to shift that paradigm to the 1619 Project, and to me, that's a very more accurate story, if you will, because none of the development of our nation as it is would be established if it had not been for these enslaved, Africans that came here initially. Our democracy continues to be one that is not shared openly with everyone because of this idea of privilege, if you will. I believe that it's just unconscious greed, unconscious selfishness that's hard to break. I mean, I was reading an article the other day. A Consumer Report has done this study on wealth. I think the study was in 2019, and it basically said that for every dollar that a white person has, a person of color, a black person has 7 cents. And I remember when I was growing up, it was like maybe half, or twice as much. So if I was making 25,000, the average white person was making 50,000. But now to hear that, it's like I'm making pennies and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's almost inconceivable that you could have that, how could you have a nation that's structured around that kind of wealth accumulation without any consideration for people who don't have? And I think that we have done a bad job, as again, we being ministers, I believe, have done a very poor job of communicating, if you will, the idea of our being our brother's keepers, our being, our neighbors, right? And our being, compassionate around even the stranger. The text itself talks about this idea of even like a Jubilee period. Historically, the Jubilee period was a time when the nation of people would take time out. They wouldn't produce anything, but they would allow then the ones who don't have the access to the resources. And they said that even that if a planter planted a crop for a year, they would not harvest the crop. They would allow the strangers and the people who don't have to go and harvest the crop and get the resources. And they would say from that, then they would be able to move themselves out of poverty. I didn't even realize that text read the way it was until after I got older and I began to understand this idea of that even within the text of our faith communities, we have ways that we can deal with these, but we choose not to do it in so many ways. So.
Well, why do you think people choose not to do it?
Well, again, I think it's the number one is ignorance on the part of the state of the nation in our own communities, right? And the fact that feeling like they don't know how to do. Our nations have been shaped one way, right? It's the idea that we have this machine that operates one way, and that we all then, we go to school, we get educated, right, and we get prepared to become a part of this machine. And until we change, this paradigm of this machine and how it functions as it relates to our economy, then we're never going to get out of that. But I believe that we then, as the prophetic voices, have to be the one that to be the cry in the wilderness, if you will, to be the one to bring voice to that. And again, that's the work that I'm doing. So the idea for me then is that if people are concerned and they want to get involved, we equip them with some things, at least some knowledge, and then we say, come and join us here at the Share Cooperative. And we're building a community. We're changing the way of life through this place that we call the Share Cooperative in the Harvest Market.
Okay, I'm just gonna zoom in. I just want to make sure we got. Okay. Well, it's curious. I mean, just as all this movement to deny history that we're seeing with CRT and all that, like, oh yeah, we had slavery, but there was no systemic racism. Is
right.
That people?
Right.
We're in a strange, regressive.
Yeah, we are. We are.
Talk about that a little.
Yeah.
bit.
I think that when a nation has come 400 or 500 years, operating a certain way, the idea of treating some people one way and then other people another way. I mean, even to the point, you really have to get down to the kinds of things that we actually did to socialize and condition ourselves and other people. And the example that I can give you is like during after slavery, and slavery in and of itself was bad enough, but then through Jim Crow, right, they want to continue to try to perpetuate this apartheid, if you will, in the South. They actually went so far as they being the the Ku Klux Klans and supremacist groups went so far as to hang people. And so when you start hanging somebody, taking their life in that way, and then actually not on hanging them, but then doing it on a Sunday, and doing it in times right then when the broader community could see it. And when you have evidence of that, through pictures, I understand there was postcards being made, right, of hangings, right, of people's body being burned. I even heard the postcards that people would talk about. They took, souvenirs, cutting people's testicles off and the fingers off. So when you have that kind of culture, right, and you have this a way of perpetuating that culture through denial and through silence, right, do the act but don't talk about it. So you get to a place then, if you have that, it's kind of, really it's almost madness, right? Because what do you do with your kids? What do you do with babies, right? And in some of these pictures, you had children standing up with their family over a hung person. So what did they do with that? I mean, they had the, children might ask questions, say, well, don't worry about it, it's okay, be silent. And I have no idea, but I'm just saying, for us to be in a place as a nation with people who don't remember that or cannot talk about that, someone has done a very good job, right, of socializing folks into a way of denial, right, and not seeing it. To the point, a lot of times when I'm doing dialogues, sometimes some people call it affinity groups, right, especially between diverse groups, and we're asking folks to chime in, to share what and we're asking them to ask questions about your life. What do you know about racism as it relates to your life? Not my life as a person of color, but your life. Most people would say, well, what I don't, I'm here to learn. I don't know. I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? I said, you're as old as I am. Okay, if the person's that age, right? How can you not know? So then what I have to do in some cases, I have to, kind of say, okay, well, tell me your story. Where'd you grow up? What kind of things were you, involved with? What kind of things did you hear, right, as a person? Did you hear an uncle, say, use the N-word, right? Did you hear of a story of a hanging, Or was your community designed so that it was segregated? So you have to begin to ask more specific kinds of questions. And then if the person is vulnerable enough, if the space is safe enough, then they begin to talk. And it's amazing to me how people can kind of open up and share things about like that. I was involved. Last night I was on a call with the White Privilege Conference. They're here next week. And it's a group, it's a national group. They've been in about 23 years now. And the idea is to help educate people about white privilege. And so my thing was, we're always asked questions. We, as people of color, are always asked questions about, how do you think about this aspect of race and racism? And I began now to turn to questions. I no longer accept this question being asked to me, but I ask you. What do you know? How do you think about? What do you think about the question, of your faith community, right? Of your pastor not talking about justice in the pulpit? What do you think about, right, your family seeing an event take place that's unjust, but nothing been said about it? And so I'm thinking through those kinds of things is the way we can change the world. If we don't begin to, acknowledge it, see it, right, and address it, then we'll never be able to change. And I think those are the kind of things that are going to have to happen more so now than ever.
So, yeah, it's, it's hard to understand how people can live with themselves. For example, the voters, what's going on with trying to suppress the vote.
Right.
All these states, 20 of them or whatever,
right,
pass these laws, like Texas,
right,
our state, and how they fought to undo the Voting Rights Act,
right,
and the Supreme Court,
right,
gutting that act and allowing,
right,
this stuff.
Whatever can be done to maintain this thing of power. It's the idea of controlling power, right, and what you do with power. You know what I mean? And what does it have to do with people living lives freely and equitably? You know what I mean? But there's something. I can't answer that question. I'm sorry, I'm not a white person. I can't answer that question. It'd be nice for me to have a conversation with the white person who's willing to really dig into that and say, this is why we do it. Because I don't know what the answer is, but I know that it's. I think it's immoral, right? I think it's actually immoral, right, to have the power to help folks, especially in need, right, the poor and the unhealthy, right? We have systems, we have mechanisms that we can provide resources for folks to have these things and to begin to be healed and to be made whole again, but yet you got folks that are, just not willing to do that.
Well, it's that dehumanization process where it makes it somehow okay to turn, ignore poverty and, you know, people in need and live with yourself somehow and have ridiculous amounts of way more than you can possibly spend. I mean,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
so, so how do you? Uh, One thing I'm interested in these interviews for this project is, and there are a number of ministers besides yourself that we've interviewed and will continue to. But beyond, how do you keep your sense of faith in all this?
Well, my story, as far as my faith journey is concerned, is really something that has helped me to keep faith, as you say. And basically, it's this: if you grow up in a time and in a system where injustice is the order of the day, you have to find a way to survive if you want to live. Right? You have to find a way. You have to figure out what that is. And fortunately, in our community, we have ancestors, if you will, right, descendants that have endured the same kinds of things. We got stories of documentaries now of ex-slaves, right, coming through slavery. And the idea, though, is that at the bottom of it is the idea of this idea of a spirit of hope and peace and justice, right, and the idea of the acknowledgement that there's a creator greater than us all that has power to change things. And so after you hear that, and then you begin to try that on, this idea. I was with some young people yesterday, and one of them was a young man who was in a car accident, and he's burned pretty bad. And his sister was there with him, and she was even, questioning this idea about, about the afterlife, and whether there is afterlife, a young person, really inquisitive. And my response to her was that it's not so important for you right now to know about the afterlife. It's more important for you to know that there's a creator God right now acting in your life. So the question is then, how are you going to develop this relationship with this God? This is a God that has created all of us in God's image and has put in us this spiritual way of being. That's a conscience, right? That is actually something that is active, right? And so, so what do we do with that? And so with my life, then, the journey of everything, even what I talked about today, the reason why that's been done is this idea that in this spiritual thing in me, right, has allowed me, if you will, provided me, encouraged me, to hang in there, to continue to do, right? I mean, even the text sometimes, talks about you take one step, God would would take two. And, those are stories that are in the community. And I believe that because I've lived that. There's times, like for instance, when I accepted the call to come into ministry, right? Shortly after that, my wife and I, we went to a family reunion in Durham, on my side of the family. And after the reunion, we were at a church. I saw my wife was talking to someone. I went to the car, and she said, "You need to talk to this guy." I said, "Okay, well," she said, "No, you need to talk to him now." So I get out the car, go over to this guy, and he said, "Oh, you're the minister." And by then, I had only accepted the call. I hadn't been, doing anything. He said, I said, "Yeah, I've accepted." He said, "Well," "don't do like other ministers do." I said, "Well," he said, "Well, as you can tell, I've been drinking." He says, "But they don't cotton to that. They don't want to accept me in, but I know that God accepts everyone. So I hope that you, in your ministry, that you will be one that, embraces everybody." And so that cycle of those types of things continued to happen to me. My wife and I, we could be at the mall. Someone walking up to me and say, "Oh, you're a pastor." I said, "Well, yeah." And so I'm saying this to say God has a way to let you know, right, that God is in communion with you, right? God talks through other people. And so I shared this with this young lady. I said, "Look, just continue to ask the questions. If you want to know what the future holds, then ask God. Things will work out for you as you continue to become more aware, right? More in tune and more hopeful and trusting." And now for a lot of people, it's hard, I think what makes it difficult for a lot of people to embrace that invitation is experience, because we have been a people of oppression, right? We have then been more in contact with then this power because we had no power, right? The idea of having a power that, through it all, that, helps us to make it through a situation, right? Harriet Tubman, you're bringing all these people out of slavery, right? Through the power of God, right? The idea of, giving yourself over to someone, this idea, of God, this real God, and the more you do that, then the more you begin to see it's real. And so those are the things that have made me. I get up every day knowing that, that I don't have control of the world. All I have to do is show up. God's going to do the rest. And so I believe that, and I share that with you. I offer anybody the opportunity to know God, because God is here for everyone. It's not my God, it's your God, it's our God.
That's wonderful. Do you think young people, they talk, people talk about how overall in this country, or if you look at Europe, churches are, that people aren't going like they,
Yeah.
England,
right.
like they close these churches down.
Right.
Why is it that people are losing their, churches provide the sense of community, and I think we're also losing senses. Our institutions don't seem to be able to, people feel alienated and polarized,
right.
For a lot of reasons,
right.
But can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I think the main thing is that if churches are not savvy enough to listen to young people's voices and to acknowledge, right, that they're a part of our community, right, and to provide them the mechanism to offer their gifts, to be a part of the ministry, right, and the fact that, when you have so much, injustice doing, on you, and but yet you are preaching about this God, right? You're preaching about these things, right, and things don't appear to be happening. They get disenchanted, right? And so that's why, I really felt, the need to engage with this young lady, because, she's got to find God for herself. Now we then ministers are the ones who have been called to provide spaces and opportunities for one to hear the word, right? But we have to be able to provide it in ways that they connect with, right? I was in Chicago 3 weeks ago, and I was at this conference of Christian educators. And one of the theologians there had gone to the Bible, and he really defined what it meant to be a teacher. All through God's word, it talks about this idea of teaching, being a teacher. Jesus was a teacher. And so, the simple job of a teacher is to provide a good word. And that good word has to be a word that connects with whoever it is. And so if it's a young person, that good word has to be able to connect with that young person where they are. And so if we're going to be the savvy ministers and prophetic voices that we are called to be, then we need to be sharp enough that if we're in conversation with a young person, then we need to provide a means for them to hear the word in a way that connects with them. And I don't think that we as a church are doing that very well. And that's why, this idea of folks falling away, congregations, if you will, are getting small, are getting older. There's more older people than there are young people, right? But it's a transition. I believe that the church will come back. I believe the church that I'm involved with right now is one of those churches that's going to respond in a positive way and going to do things and provide ways, for folks to come in. One thing that I found that was very helpful, the thing that I did with them yesterday, these young people, is that I said that, anytime you get to a place, where you can't, you don't know what to say, then hum. Hum something, and I asked them, I said, well, what is your hum? What is your hymn? And they kind of said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what about this? Amen. 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 Sing it over. Amen. 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 We are feeling, thinking, voicing beings. We're spiritual beings. And when you don't have nothing to say, you can hum. You can sing. You can get in touch with God that way. That's our life. That's who we are. That's who we have to invite people to be.
Is that the only way to reach some of these people that are got hate on them?
No. Well, see, that's an interesting question because all the organizations that I am now involved with, what I say is that we have no permanent enemies and no permanent friends. And if that's our logos, then what we have to do is figure out ways that we can engage folk. And so even the ones who are the most haters, the word says, if a person, comes at you with hate, then you come at them with love, right? Now, granted, I mean, that's more easier said than done, but the whole idea is to respond, with this idea of, there is a way that we can respond, there's a way that we can be together, right? And so the haters, we may not reach all the haters, but we are reaching enough of the haters, right, that we can make a difference. And so in order to do that, you have to be of a mindset, though, that, there is no enemies, there's no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. So you got to work with that. I mean, I wake up every day, with the perspective of that, I meet no one, who's a stranger. I meet no one who, that I hate. I give people the opportunity to be who they are. And they determine to me, what that means to them by how they respond. And so we just need more people that can embrace folk and can meet them where they are and can listen and really hear, what they're going through, and provide, a means for them to go forward. And young people are the same way. I mean, they're struggling with something, but we need to find out what it is and provide for them a means for them to feel like they're a part of it, the society, and have resources to do that. And of course, we do a very poor job, in the educational system of giving them a voice, of allowing them an opportunity to be themselves and do things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I may have mentioned I teach this course called Movies That Matter at UNCG. We show films that have social themes to them. We just looked at Fruitvale Station, about killing of a young African American, a true story. Louis Selma, some of the, even a movie like Remember the Titans.
Right.
And then we talk about the film and what's the themes behind that story.
Yep.
And people write papers about how they felt about that particular film. A range of films, probably most of them to do with race, but some films like Thelma and Louise that look at women's, how would you want to call it, women's liberation.
Right, women's right, liberation.
Taking on the patriarchy,
exactly.
and gay struggles.
Yep.
So it allows students, for all of us, to just talk very freely about how we're talking about the. I was making a parallel between the story of Fruitvale Station, and this white cop killing this needless, horrible killing of a young African American man at the BART station out in Oakland, California, and then making a comparison, connection with that with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, imposing its will. This, I think, which is basically Putin's a white supremacist maniac.
Right.
So, for young people, I'm so, I worry, about their future. I'm 71. But in terms of, obviously, we talk about this, all the issues, climate change being a huge one, of course.
Right. It's really the main one, I believe. If we don't get right with climate, we just may as well just, give it up. You know what I mean? Because if we don't shift, all of this pollution and things that are, causing our weather to be hotter, to be, less cyclical as it was created, the four seasons and all that. And we are killing, if you will, the planet, and therefore we will die with the planet. And so I really believe we got to work on climate change very seriously. It's no and others. It's no listing. It's top of the list for me. It really is. Now, because a lot of things that we do, I mean, pollution, everything that we do, is a detriment, to the environment. Now we're doing some things toward that, like you mentioned earlier, this idea of alternative, energy sources. I think that's good. We need to do that like yesterday. You know what I mean? We've had the technology for, I don't know what, 25 years or more. I mean, I remember when people were talking about electric cars and, electric, light bulbs, changing the sources of bulbs. I even worked in a project when I mentioned to you earlier about part of my work as a young chemist and intern. We used to talk about biodegradable bags. I remember that. Biodegradable plastic bags. Because, plastic, it's just like, it can go on for years, right? And so we had a project, we actually did that. But it never got, any mileage, because then the powers that be said, well, that's something for another day. Their focus was, well, we make a lot more money on plastics and stuff the way they are. Why should we change to do something that's going to cost a little bit more to produce, right? But not thinking again about the environment. So, but young people, I think if we keep them a young person, they're vibrant, they're creative, they're energetic, right? And they're courageous, right? They're all of this. And if we don't then allow them to be that way, in a way then that's, controlled, if you will, you know what I mean, guided, right? But also motivating for them, then we have, these places where they feel, not included, not connected, you know what I mean? They take on all these different characteristics of not being seen, like you said, the different identities. We have done such a good job of building silos and names for different types of groups, the ins and the outs, right? And yet we're all created in God's image, and we're really all the same, But yet we have this idea of power, and some have to have power while others don't. So it's a lot. I mean, the challenge is that we can't do it alone. We have to be in community together. We have to be sharing. We have to provide opportunities to everyone that we can to feel good about themselves. So it's like a one-on-one job, but it's a mass job, And the more people we get on that journey, I think the faster it'll happen. But it's slow, continuous work.
So your life is devoted to.
Oh, it's no doubt. Yeah.
To this.
Yeah, I get up every morning, and I try to do something, each day, to make a difference, to help change the world. Yeah, and I mean, I don't get up in the morning and say, okay, what am I going to do today? I just walk through the world in a way that I like to see, the world done to me. It's the idea about doing to others as you have them to do unto yourself. I mean, that's what I'm about. It's the idea, how can we do that? How can we meet, someone and hear them? If they have a need that day, do what we can. If we can't, be able to direct them to someone or someone else that can help them. Yeah. To have acknowledgement that humanity is important for everyone, that we all live here and share it together. I think it's important.
So does your faith give you optimism?
Well, my faith not only gives me optimism, it gives me hope, it gives me encouragement. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole challenge for Christianity, my faith, is the fact that it's been misused. It's been misshaped. For a very long time. But the thread, if you will, that connects me and that I've been connected all my life is the idea about justice and humanity. The idea that we're all one, we're all together, and justice is key. You can't have peace without having justice. And it's all grounded in love. You have to be able to love, one another. And again, the fact that matters is that everybody's not raised like that. And so what do? Then you just have to, those that you meet, you have to give them the opportunity to experience that. You know, God says, be the light of the world. You know, make a difference with everyone you meet.
Well, that's a great. This is a strange segue, but can you talk a little bit about your family? We probably should have gotten that earlier on, but obviously you're married. You
Yeah,
have
I'm married to
children.
Shirley Diane. As a matter of fact, we're going to be celebrating 44 years of marriage this
Congratulations.
year. I have 4 kids, right? 2 boys and 2 girls. The oldest girl, she has blessed us with grandsons. They're twins, 9. They are doing, very well. They have been able to have a lot of experiences at a young age, doing a lot of things that the average child wouldn't do. She made sure that she had a membership in most of the museums across the state. So every summer or whatever, they go into a museum or somewhere, to learn. So she's done a good job in educating them. I have a son who has cerebral palsy. He's done as best he could, for the years that he's been, around. And then I've got my youngest son is in the military. He's done well for himself. He went through the educational system. Basically, all of my kids were educated. They chose to go to school, go to college. Lived in different places, but we're connected. I can say that one thing about our families is that we are close. We check in on each other. I feel good about knowing that I can call my kids anytime, or they can call me anytime, no matter what time of day or night it is, and check in. Because I believe that family is the most important thing in life, except for God. And I think that a lot of problems we have in the world today is because of broken families. And if we could keep families connected and together and boost them where they need to be boosted and discipline where they need to be disciplined, they'll turn out all right. So, wife retired now, 36 years in the airlines, and so she's just beginning to learn how it means to be retired.
How's that process for her?
Well, it's doing well. She's the COVID has made a lot of difference in that. She hasn't been able to be out a lot, but she's doing well. She's learning how to be retired, and she says that she doesn't feel right because we both should be retired, but I'm still working. I'm still at it. So, but it's been an interesting journey. I don't regret anything I'm doing, so it's not a requirement for me right now to be retired. I suspect I'll retire when we've birthed this store and when we've established these places where people can come in and shop and be healthy and whole. So that's my goal.
So the mission continues.
The mission continues.
Well, I think we've covered a whole lot of ground here in your amazing journey, and really appreciate your sharing it with us. And are there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that like you said, I think we've covered it all. I just appreciate the opportunity to provide a story that I hope that can help someone, a story that can provide maybe a little different way of thinking about things for some folk, and be able to use it as a way to feel like, yes, I can do anything I want to do. That yes, there are ways that I can access. Asking other people is not a crime. It's the best thing you can do. If you don't know something, ask a question. And trying things is another thing. This idea about being courageous enough. I heard Cornel West say in one of his, he did some music one time, and he said, "Step out on nothing so you can land on something." Very profound, in the faith of God. This idea that God got you. So I just leave that. I say, God got all of us. Let's embrace that, and let's change this world to the place where the community of God can break through. We can all live in harmony.
Well, it's about a year. So there was the 40th anniversary of the Greensboro Massacre, and my wife Cornelia and I went to it, because we know Reverend Nelson Johnson, who was in the Union film, and we've been involved with that Moral Monday movement too, and all that, and somebody said there was at Bennett College there was this memorial service and there were a number of the survivors there. One of whom is in the interview, Sydney Waller, Foxworth. Her husband was murdered there that day in '79, and she since passed away. And I'm very glad that we have her interview, because she was a lifelong activist against the war of Vietnam.
Right.
Trying to unionize cone mills back then, and all that stuff. But somebody said, when you fight, you win. When you fight, you win. Not when you win the fight, but when you fight, you win.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing, because if you don't do anything, it's very easy to get depressed.
Exactly. I think that's the whole point. You win, your soul wins. I would add this idea. When you're fighting for justice, and that's the assumption, right? It's not just fighting for the sake of fighting, because we got a lot of people doing that. But when you're fighting for justice, right, you're winning, because you're number one, you're doing what God has put in your heart to do. When you have the courage to stand up and do something in response to an injustice, in response to a wrong, then you're winning. Yeah, so to fight means to fight against injustice, to fight against poverty, to fight against wrong. So fighting is winning, and you feel it. You can feel it. You feel like you've done something to help somebody else or yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you too. I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to shut it down now.
Cool.